Hi, I'm Jackie Woods at the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, and I'm joined today by Katrina Tucker from A Human Agency, and we have just finished a terrific event here at the agency. It's the first one in our Too Hard Basket series, where we explore the issues that employers find too hard when it comes to dealing with gender equality in the workplace. And today's hot topic was attracting women and men into non-traditional areas, because a common refrain that we hear is that, well, we'd love more women or we'd love more men, but they just don't apply. So what do we do about that? We had an excellent discussion, and the agency's data shows that this is a very real problem. Australia has a very segregated workforce. 6 in 10 Australians work in an industry that is dominated by one or other gender. At one end of the spectrum, we have industries like mining and construction that are about 80% men. At the other, healthcare and social assistance, which is about 80% women. And what's really concerning is that graduate data shows that graduates entering those industries show that they're becoming even more concentrated, even more male and female dominated. Yeah. So, big challenge for employers who recognise that diversity is good for their workplace culture and good for their business, but it's just not happening, or they're really struggling to attract and retain women and men in their workplaces. So, one of the things that jumped out at me today was, a discussion about sort of workplace culture and how important that is. People talked about, they had a perception of whether a workplace would be friendly for them. And there was a great line about, does everyone really want to go to the Grand Prix? Yeah. Because of the expectations that some industries have about the kind of activities people will take. So what did you take out of that discussion about the importance of culture?
It's absolutely critical, and I think the reason why is we know that attracting people is step one, but retaining them is really what's important, and what's going to be important for retention is the culture. It's the stick factor, isn't it? So you can put all the ads out, you can get people through the gates, but if they're not going to enjoy working there, we had a few, really open and honest stories about crying in the lift, when you're leaving work. That's a culture you're not going to stay in, and you will walk out the door. So that cultural point is absolutely critical, and it was great that we got to sort of deep dive into some of the things that create the culture. So like you said, it's the stereotypes, it's the events, it's the behaviours, things written on walls, things being said to people, the way flexibility is approached. All of it goes into the Too Hard Basket, which got named, thankfully. And I think what was really interesting about the stats on the grads that you just mentioned is it just shows that generational change won't fix this. So anyone who's saying this will just change with the next generation,
it's not happening.
It's not happening. We've got to do something transformational.
So what were some of the sort of practical tips, I guess, that we heard from employers today about what they are doing?
Look, I think the first one that jumped out was really targets and how important well-constructed, meaningful, measured targets are, and the data and the analytics, like really knowing, Val was amazing. She said they measure it monthly and track it monthly.
That's at St Barbara.
At St Barbara, that's right. And that sort of focus and attention on the current state, and then driving that down and putting a mirror up to behaviour that's not good enough and performance that's not good enough, it really sets you up for success. Leadership, obviously, and beyond just leadership, ownership of the issue. I think it's that clear statement, this is not a HR issue, this is a business issue. That has to back up that culture change. That was absolutely critical. And then some of those structures and processes are still not friendly. So we had examples of, how flexible work requests are handled, and they're handled in a way that completely demoralises anybody who is thinking that they might possibly balance work and life. So,
for example, having the same sales targets, or that sort of thing, but trying to work a part-time role.
Yeah, that's right. So
another thing that jumped out at me was, when thinking about recruiting, perhaps proudly stating that you want to attract women and men, but then, the requirements are quite unreasonable. So the kind of training that people might already be expected to have, or that they need to travel for 12 weeks to complete the training to do the job might be a real barrier for some people. So actually having that conversation, can we change what's required?
Yeah.
To attract the people.
And it's interesting because you think, well, how did that sort of an advertisement happen? I think there's a lot of assumptions about what other people want from the groups in this conversation. So there's a lot of assumptions about what women want. There's a lot of assumptions about what men want. But then when you hear the real stories of, you know, male facing huge stress and huge anxiety at work, and women, you know, being demoralised and experiencing sexist work, we need to hear those real stories to know that things are not perfect.
Yeah, and there are work cultures that aren't working for anyone, really.
Yeah, but out of job security, quite understandably, people will be saying it's all okay, but it is seriously not okay.
So there are things that employers can do in their own workplaces, but you know, there's a bigger issue too, isn't there, about what employers can do to attract people into their industry at an earlier stage, so at school and university. Did we hear anything about, you know, what was the discussion about that today?
I think we all know that employers need to look after their own turf and clean up their own backyard, and everyone acknowledges that, but really this is now such a big societal issue, and dealing with some of those perceptions and stereotypes of what it's like to work in those industries, and it applies equally in both. So perceptions on what it's like for a woman to enter a male-dominated industry, and just as powerfully, you know, what happens to a man who wants to work in a female-dominated industry, and the perceptions of masculinity. These things can only be changed at a cultural or social level. So a lot of work to be done there. Good suggestions around industry bodies and peak bodies, and you know, what can they be doing more effectively, because that's very difficult, as well as also using the supply chain. You know, how influential can purchasing power be? And if you are big enough to use your purchasing power to drive change, how important that can be as a social lever. So I loved it. Somebody talked about, you know, the difference between tinkering and transformation. I think we all need to be doing lots of little things, but we need to be eye on the big picture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
It's a terrific event, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Viewers, please feel free to leave questions in the messages and we'll come back to you. Also, you can look at our women's work, men's work material on the WGEA website, where we profile women and men in non-traditional industries. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.